What is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome to week 7 of tracking trends in fantasy football. Once again, we're going to be going through players' performances through the first 6 weeks of the season. Try to find out who is trending in the right and wrong direction. Now, this will continue to help us find some of those players in fantasy football with the most consistent hit and miss rates. We will once again go through the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position in this video today. Now, just to clarify, once again, you're going to be able to see the hit rates for each player as well as their average fantasy points per game through the first 6 weeks of the season. Now, obviously, hit rates are calculated on a per game basis, and the average fantasy points per game is considered a season-long number. But I show you both of them on purpose. By doing it that way, you're able to see if these players are a little bit more boom or bust or a lot more consistent on a week-to-week basis. If a player is averaging 16 fantasy points per game, but they've got a hit rate of only 25%, I think it's pretty safe to say that that player is a little bit more boom or bust. However, if a player is averaging 16 fantasy points per game and their hit rate is 75%, that means they're going to be a lot more consistent. Now, speaking of consistency, we hit on 6 of our 9 picks on Underdog in our Friday lottery ticket video in week 6. We have now hit 20 of our last 27 picks in that show. That's a hit rate of 74%. Now, we're going to be doing it once again this Friday, so come check out my picks of the week in that video. Now, you're going to want to make sure you're all set up on Underdog by that time so you can play along with us. Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Then, all you got to do is make your minimum $10 deposit. You'll get all the promos that they're going to be offering in week 7. Plus, when you play your first $5, you're going to get $100 in bonus funds just added to your account. I'm sorry, play 5, get 100 is absolutely bonkers. You don't want to miss out on it. But if you really want to dive into this world a little bit more, consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube by hitting the join button just below the video. You'll get access to our Discord if you're a member of Full Chub or Excessive Chub, where we talk picks all week long. Plus, if you're in our Discord, you get a huge discount to NextPlay, and they hand out even more picks than we do. Super high hit rates and cheaper than all the other alternatives out there. Now, there are links to all of this stuff down below in the description. I'll also pin a comment so it's easy for you to find as well. But okay, enough of that. Let's see how things are looking through the first 6 weeks of the NFL season, and I think we can all agree the first 6 weeks have been pretty disgusting. Now, we're going to be going ahead and starting off at the quarterback position. So once again, just to reiterate, I will go through this every single week just so people understand. At the quarterback position, in order to be considered a hit or a miss, 18 fantasy points is our cutoff. Anything over 18 fantasy points is a hit. Anything below that is going to be a miss. Now, we'll pull up the quarterbacks here, and we'll start off in the hot section where we have guys like Patrick Mahomes, the overall quarterback 1 right now, and he's about to get his number 1 wide receiver back. I have a feeling he's going to stay in the hot category. Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, the best quarterback in 2025 if you consider all of the weapons he has lost along the way. Then we also have guys like Jalen Hurts you would expect to be in this list. Caleb Williams playing really great when it comes to fantasy football here in 2025. Same with Jaden Daniels. Josh Allen. The Bills look a little bit broken here as of late. This one could get a little bit interesting, but when it comes to fantasy points, Josh Allen probably going to score them more times than not. Dak Prescott has been super hot. He is flying up this list. He has now had at least 22 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, and now CeeDee Lamb is close to a return. You have to think that Dak Prescott is still trending up. Then we get Drake May, who continues to play well. Jackson Dart is a name currently in the hot category, but is it going to remain there? If it does, it's going to be based off of his rushing upside more so than what he's doing in the passing game. But now let's go down to that mid-tier. Justin Fields sitting right here in the mid-tier, and honestly, he's got to be trending down. He is the definition of boom or bust. He has 3 games this season with over 25 fantasy points in each game. However, he also has 2 games where it looks like he's never played football before in his life. And this is why we do this show. A player like this, Justin Fields, on the surface has scored a ton of fantasy points. But when we really look at it, he's pretty inconsistent. Sure, he can win you a matchup, but he can also lose you a matchup as well. Then we got Daniel Jones, who's been a little bit lower producing here as of late, but still a super solid option. Justin Herbert's here along with Matthew Stafford. Hopefully he doesn't lose Puka Nacua for too long. Mac Jones, what's going to happen when Brock Purdy is healthy? Does Mac Jones continue to play quarterback, or do they go back to Brock Purdy? You have to think that it's going to be Purdy, but Mac Jones has been playing pretty well. Then we got Trevor Lawrence here in the midsection as well. He now has back-to-back games with over 19 fantasy points, and really, it's because they're starting to figure out how to actually use Brian Thomas Jr. Trevor Lawrence is trending up as well. But after that, we got to go down to the cold section because there are some quarterbacks down here that are just not performing. We got Jordan Love, really not overly needed a lot of times in that offense. How about CJ Stroud? He actually has back-to-back games before his bye with 18 plus fantasy points. Now, they weren't the toughest matchups at all, but he is a quarterback that is currently trending up from the cold section. Jared Goff, another guy who loses a lot of touchdowns to the running game there. Then we got Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold. I really want to highlight Sam Darnold here because he may be the most underrated fantasy quarterback as of right now. And in my opinion, he is trending up quickly. He has had 20 plus fantasy points now in back-to-back games, and he hasn't gone under 16 fantasy points in a game since week 1. I know 18 points is our cutoff, but if we made it 16, the guy would be super high up in the hot category. He is definitely a name to remember if you need a quarterback in fantasy football. Then Bo Nix. He's been somewhat of a disappointment. They just can't figure out consistency in the passing game. 4 of his games this year have resulted in less than 210 yards passing, and he's only thrown multiple touchdowns twice this entire year. But then after that, a lot of guys you would probably expect to be in the cold section: Tua Tagovailoa, Bryce Young, Geno Smith, Kyler Murray. That Arizona offense is absolute dog water. Then we got Aaron Rodgers, Michael Penix, Joe Flacco, Spencer Rattler, Cam Ward, and Dylan Gabriel. Now that will take us through the quarterbacks, which brings us to the running backs next. Remember, for a running back to be considered a hit or a miss, the threshold is 10 fantasy points here. So at the top of the list, we got 4 running backs that have hit that 10-point mark in all of their games this season: Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, and Devon Achane. Now, that really shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of people. They were drafted highly for a reason. Someone who is a surprise is Javonte Williams in Dallas. He's averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game and has crossed that 10-point mark in all but one game this season. What's crazy to me is it really seems like he struggles in the easier matchups and plays really well in the tougher ones. But with the way he looks in that backfield, he probably remains in this hot category because even with the return of CeeDee Lamb, that just pulls defenders outside of the box. Then we got Jahmyr Gibbs, Cam Skattebo, and we have been talking about this kid in this show for weeks. We even said in this show last week that we did not care if Tyrone Tracy came back. This is now the Cam Skattebo backfield. The kid plays so hard, you can't take him off the field hardly ever. Then he goes out and has the best game of the season and has scored at least 10 fantasy points in every game with the exception of week 1. There's not a lot of offensive weapons in New York. He's going to be relied upon weekly. He probably stays hot. Then we have J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, and then Jaylen Warren, who's gone over 10 points in 3 of his 4 games, but the Arthur Smith effect is happening. Warren has played pretty good football this entire season, but now all of a sudden they're just taking away touches. Only 13 total touches last week. Kenneth Gainwell had 12 total touches, and then Caleb Johnson all of a sudden comes in and takes 6 touches. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to hate this, but Jaylen Warren may be trending down here in the coming weeks. Then we also have James Cook, not a huge surprise. Okay, let's go down to the midsection now here. First up, Kyren Williams. He's had 80 plus yards or a touchdown in every game this year, and he's already halfway to his 2024 reception total. More passing work in 2025 has been a big boost for him. Now with the potential injury to Puka, you have to think that Kyren is relied upon even more. How about Ashton Genty? This offense absolutely sucks in Las Vegas, but at least they realized after 3 weeks they need to get this kid the ball more often. He's now had at least 13 fantasy points in 3 straight games. Then Saquon Barkley, and I think the Eagles maybe slightly broken. This offense is just way too predictable. There are way too many what-ifs every single week. Saquon hasn't had over 100 total yards in a game yet this season. Then we got Travis Etienne, DeAndre Swift. Everyone hated DeAndre Swift all offseason long when I was telling people to draft him at his ADP. Well, he's now the running back 18 overall, has 12 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games played, plus he's already had his bye week, so people will be able to use him remainder of the season. Then we have Quinshon Judkins, followed by Rico Dowdle. He has only started 2 games this entire year, but yet he's the RB 11 overall in fantasy football. 30 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games, and he has earned a role in this backfield no matter when Chuba Hubbard returns. Now you have to think that that ceiling comes down just a little bit, but he could be flex-worthy rest of season. Then David Montgomery, Derrick Henry in this mid-tier as well. The bye has come at a perfect time for the Baltimore Ravens, hoping they can get a little bit healthier over the bye week, and Henry can get back on track second half of the season. Then Kenneth Walker. I have never seen so much hate for the RB 20 overall when he was drafted as the RB 17 just 7 weeks ago. I get questions weekly on whether or not Kenneth Walker should be dropped. Why would we drop the RB 20 overall in fantasy football? Has he underproduced? Yeah, he totally has. But so has the majority of all running backs in fantasy football. The fact that he is still the RB 20 means he needs to stay on your rosters. He's another guy that could get hot quick and definitely trend up at some point this year. Then we got Breece Hall, Rachaad White. As long as we have no Bucky, Rachaad White will continue to trend up. We got Alvin Kamara, and apparently no trade is going to be happening, and he is stuck in this horrible Saints offense. Kamani Vidal is here as well. He's still going to split touches with Hassan Haskins. However, he earned the bigger of the 2 roles last week in week 6. They're going to give him a chance to see if he can keep the momentum going. And then after that, we got the backfield in Arizona. We got Michael Carter and Zonovan Bam Knight. And honestly, I'm trying to avoid this backfield at all costs. They're like weekly landmines in Arizona. You never know who's going to touch the football. You never know who's going to get the touchdown opportunities. There aren't many touchdown opportunities to even go around. So I would not be surprised if they find themselves in the cold category here rather quickly. Speaking of the cold category, let's move down to it. We got Jordan Mason. He's coming off his bye week, and we know Aaron Jones is nearing a return. How about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt or Bill? He got the touches. He had the matchup in week 6, and then he just took a dump with the opportunity that he was given, and that is not what we want to see. We wanted to see more volume, and when he got it, he didn't perform, so now there's a chance that they go back to a little bit more of a split in the future. Then we got Tony Pollard, just not a lot of touchdowns to go around in Tennessee. Kareem Hunt, another backfield, not too interested in there in Kansas City. Ramondre Stevenson can do whatever he wants with the football, it doesn't matter. Travion Henderson's not going to touch it very much, but he's still highly touchdown dependent there. Nick Chubb, Chase Brown, a lot of people they've had it with Chase. They just don't want anything to do with Chase Brown, and honestly, he's averaging 8.1 fantasy points per game, but I really don't want a whole lot to do with Chase Brown either, but he's just one of those guys that I don't want to drop, because if somebody were to pick him up and just stash him, and they were to figure it out later on in the season, I wouldn't want to be beat by the team that picked up Chase Brown, especially if Chase Brown is the player that ends up beating me down the stretch. I'd almost rather just stash him on the bottom of my bench and forget he even exists in fantasy football. Then we have RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, Isaiah Pacheco. No surprise that these guys are in the cold section. So now that we've gone through running back, let's head over to the wide receivers. We'll start off in the hot category. There are only 2 wide receivers in the NFL that have 10 plus fantasy points in all of their games this season, and one of them has only played in 2 games this season. We know that Jackson Smith-Njigba is super hot right now, but Jordan Addison is the other guy. Yes, he's only played in 2 games. The bad part is when your hit rate's 100%, you have nowhere really to go but down, and there is an opportunity for Jordan Addison to trend down slightly. Then we got Puka Nacua. Hopefully he can bounce back here pretty quick from injury. How about George Pickens? He may cool off slightly with the return of CeeDee Lamb coming, but this time that he has had as the wide receiver 1 in Dallas has been so beneficial for the chemistry between him and Dak Prescott. I have a feeling that George Pickens has a chance to remain hot even once Lamb returns. Then Emeka Egbuka, he suffered a hamstring injury. Roma Odunze should be up in that 100% hit rate category. He scored a touchdown that didn't count in week 6 due to a ridiculous illegal formation flag. And it's not that it maybe wasn't a penalty, it's just a penalty that they hardly ever call. So given the fact it happened to Roma Odunze on a touchdown reception when so many people needed those fantasy points, boy did that one hurt. Then we got Quentin Johnston, he's not 100% healthy right now. How about DK Metcalf? It is all propped up by touchdowns when it comes to DK because he hasn't had more than 5 receptions in a game this year. However, does have touchdowns in 4 straight ball games. Then we get Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson now dealing with an injury. He's going to miss some time. Deebo Samuel still here in the hot category, but you can tell that he is playing at less than 100% with that heel injury. Then we get Jalen Waddle, who was trended up after the injury to Tyreek Hill. Devontae Adams, probably going to stay hot, and he's probably going to get ridiculous volume with the injury to Puka Nacua. Then we got Cortland Sutton. Michael Pittman is starting to trend down ever so slightly because Josh Downs is starting to take away more and more targets each and every week. And then lastly, Nico Collins. He started to turn it on here his last 2 games. Hopefully he can continue that and really remain hot for us the second half of the season. All right, now let's go down to that mid category where we got Jamar Chase, and I hate to say it, but I think we have a little hope, right? 12 targets, 10 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown with Joe Flacco last week, who'd only been in town for like a week. You have to think that the chemistry here improves in yet another week together. If we can get 12 targets a week going to Jamar Chase from Joe Flacco, he's going to be fantasy relevant once again. Then Keenan Allen here in that midsection, still getting a ton of volume. He just can't bring in the targets. He has 16 targets to only 9 receptions over the last 2 games played. Then Zay Flowers. Tedero McMillan just found the end zone twice in week 6. He is trending up. How about Marquise Hollywood Brown and Tyquan Thornton in Kansas City? You have to think that with the return of Rashee Rice here, they're probably going to start trending down as well. Then we get Ladd McConkey. Great to see that they finally remember that Ladd McConkey is in this offense, but don't forget, Quentin Johnston missed that game due to injury in week 6. Once he returns, do we see Ladd McConkey be more boom or bust? He's a name we're watching closely. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, obviously, he's probably going to miss this week with a concussion. We know that Kyler Murray's not 100%. The Arizona offense overall isn't great. However, the last 2 games we've seen Marvin Harrison Jr. on the field, we've seen them push the ball down the field to him. So as bad as this offense is, there is a little bit of hope second half of the season that they continue to feed Marv deeper down the field. But all right, now we go down to the cold section, and the cold section is forever long. How about Drake London here at the top? And this dude, honestly, right now is strapped to a rocket ship. He's finally healthy. The Falcons are gaining confidence, and he has had 26 targets, 18 receptions, 268 yards, and 2 touchdowns in just his last 2 games played. He started off slow. He suffered a shoulder injury early on in the season and played through it. He struggled, but now he's healthy and he is trending up quickly. Then we got the likes of Romeo Doubs. How about Kendrick Bourne still in the cold section? However, over the last 2 weeks, I think we can all agree he has been freaking hot with over 140 yards receiving. But that production here as of late is eventually going to fade once they get healthy in San Francisco. Can they ever get healthy in San Francisco is the biggest question. It sounds like George Kittle will come back in week 7, but it also sounds like Juwan Jennings is really banged up and we have no idea what's happening with Ricky Pearsall, and Brandon Ayuk doesn't look even close either. So when you look at the big picture, maybe we have a couple more weeks of Kendrick Bourne. Then we got Trey Tucker, Wan'Dale Robinson, who should continue to see more targets with all the injuries there in New York. Brian Thomas Jr. now has had back-to-back games of at least 10 fantasy points after sucking to start the season. For the first time all year, he's trending up. That's great news. Then we got Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. In that passing game, not a lot of touchdowns to go around. Kayshon booty rocking everywhere with Stephon Diggs. They can't find consistency in this offense. Whenever they throw the ball to either one of these guys, they produce. The problem is there's plenty of games where they just do not throw the ball to these guys. Then we got Khalil Shakir, Jamison Williams. We know he's boomer bust. Xavier Worthy, probably going to remain a little bit more boomer bust as well with the return of Rashee Rice. Then we get A.J. Brown, averaging just 7.7 fantasy points per game. He has scored 10 plus fantasy points in 2 games this season, but obviously there's just no consistency in Philadelphia right now. Then we got Cooper Kupp, Alec Eomanor. Maybe he gets a slight bump with the injury to Calvin Ridley. After him, we got Juwan Jennings, who we just mentioned. He's playing with multiple injuries. DJ Moore. At this point of the fantasy season, I'm having a hard time making an argument as to why you should keep DJ Moore on your roster and not just drop him for someone on the waiver wire. Now, that is absolutely terrifying to do with a receiver that has the kind of upside that DJ Moore does, but the dude just is not doing anything in Chicago this year. Then we get Matthew Golden. He's somewhat trending in the right direction, but really big play dependent, not getting a ton of opportunities. Ryan Flournoy had some great opportunity with no CeeDee Lamb, but now with Lamb coming back, he probably stays in the cold category. And he's right alongside Jacoby Myers. I told people weeks ago to drop Jacoby Myers. He's still cold. Keon Coleman not getting enough looks in Buffalo. They're spreading the ball around to too many other people for him to be consistent. T. Higgins. He saw 8 targets from Joe Flacco. There's a small flicker of hope here, but it's not great. I don't want to start it as of right now, but I don't know if I want to drop it either. Then Josh Downs getting targets, which is great. They're all super short though, so if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not scoring fantasy points. Calvin Ridley, he's injured. Marvin Mims. Jerry Jeudy has been droppable for weeks. And then lastly, Travis Hunter. And honestly, he may be the guy who I am most disappointed in at this point of the fantasy season. Now, don't get me wrong. When he gets the ball in his hands, the dude looks like he's on another level. He's just not getting the opportunity to get the ball in his hands very often. Now, maybe this is intentional because Jacksonville actually looks like an overall pretty solid team. Maybe their plan is to start him off slowly and really ramp him up as the season goes on. There's a little bit of hope, but as of right now, he hasn't been startable in fantasy football. All right, now let's go on to the tight end position. Once again, for the tight end position, we're only looking for 8 fantasy points per game. The tight ends don't score near as many points as the running backs and the wide receivers. And if I kept it at 10, almost everyone would suck at the tight end position. So let's keep it right here in the hot section. Darren Waller at the top with a 100% hit rate. He scored at least 8 fantasy points in all 3 of his games played. He's also had touchdowns in all 3 of those games played. Had he not scored those touchdowns, dude is sitting down in the cold category because his volume is hovering right around 4 targets per game, and that's not very much. How about Jake Ferguson? 5 straight games with at least 10 fantasy points due to the loss of CeeDee Lamb. Now, with Lamb coming back, you have to think that Ferguson cools off ever so slightly. After him is Tyler Warren. And I'm going to go ahead, maybe this is a bold statement, maybe it's not. Tyler Warren, right now, at this point of the year, may be the safest weekly start at the tight end position. He's getting touchdown opportunities. He's getting deep shots down the field. He's just consistent. Now, after him, we got Trey McBride in Arizona. Dallas, go dare, because right now I'm feeling fancy. Seems to be the only piece in this Philadelphia offense with any consistency. He's had touchdowns in 4 straight games and 9+ targets now in back-to-back games. Then we get Dalton Kincaid, who missed week 6 due to injury. Tucker Kraft, Travis Kelce. With the return of Rashee Rice, I expect Travis Kelce to start to trend down because they won't need him as much. Then A.J. Barner. He is really big play dependent, but he's getting those big play chances weekly. As of right now, he's starting off pretty hot. And then Jake Tonjes. We know that George Kittle is supposed to make a return in week 7. If that happens, Jake Tonjes' value absolutely plummets. All right, now we move down to the midsection for tight ends, where we got Sam Laporta, kind of hit or miss, right? Really boom or bust in this Detroit offense. And really, that's no surprise. Really, the only consistent plays are Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. The other pieces are great. We just can't rely on them weekly. Then Hunter Henry, he's been really hit or miss here as of late after a hot start to the season. Zach Ertz bounced back a little bit in week 6. Hopefully that can continue with Jaden Daniels. Harold Fannin Jr. Highlighting Harold Fannin Jr. here for a second, he is definitely trending up. With the injury to David Njoku, we have to pay attention to the fact that Dylan Gabriel has targeted his tight ends 29 times over the last 2 weeks of the season, we could be looking at a ton of Harold Fannin Jr. volume. Now, after him, we got Juwan Johnson, who's trending in the wrong direction, alongside Kyle Pitts, with Drake London soaking up everything. Kyle Pitts a little bit more hit or miss than we would like to see as well. All right, now down to the cold section. We got Theo Johnson. Week 6 sucked for him, but a big time drop did not help at all. You have to think that Jackson Dart is still going to be looking his way just due to the overall lack of weapons in New York. Mason Taylor, he's got to deal with the quarterback play of Justin Fields, and right now, it ain't great. Aronde Gadsden in LA. He's seen decent volume, not really putting up a lot of production with it, but at least the volume is there. Now, maybe if we see Quentin Johnston miss multiple weeks, maybe he has a better opportunity than TJ Hawkinson. He started off super slow. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Evan Ingram, he is definitely trending up as of right now. He scored at least 7 fantasy points in back-to-back ball games. Hopefully he's healthy for the rest of the season. Then we get Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant. Mark Andrews has been super cold like everyone else in Baltimore for the most part. David Njoku as well, even though now he's injured. And then Tyler Higbee. And lastly, Cade Otton. And he has to be trending up, right? We know that Emeka Egbuka is now hurt. Chris Godwin is out. Mike Evans isn't 100% healthy. Bucky Irving is still out. There's an opportunity for huge volume going the way of Cade Otton. And we saw this last year in Tampa Bay. When they lost Evans and Godwin, Cade Otton turned into a top-tier tight end in fantasy football. Given all the injuries they have and the other young weapons on the roster, you have to think that Cade Otton is relied upon a little bit more, so he definitely has the opportunity to trend up. With as crazy as fantasy football has been this year, we have to continue to find the trends. Follow consistency wherever we can. Because when things are overall bad in fantasy football, it's really easy to gravitate towards that one big game when a player explodes. But the last thing we want to do is build false hope in our lineups. Take a look at what these players are averaging and how frequently are they hitting these numbers. Because at a time like this in fantasy football, sometimes being consistent is all you need.